This is what I've learned over the last 5 years working with functional medicine and functional doctors. So we're going to dive into what you see over here, supplements that can screw you up and supplements that you might need. For an example, Dr. James Antonio.
To work, but it's also needed for thyroid stimulating hormone to work. So you can have great thyroid stimulating hormone levels, but if the signal isn't working, it doesn't matter.
So even if your blood labs look okay, you could still have some issues, and I want to cover all those bases. So we're going to talk about the Trojan horses that can take you out, which is basically all of these things here. Then we're going to unpack, this is the analogy that I was given, and I like V8, so I'm old school, I'm 52. So back in the day, I had a 351 Cleveland, and it didn't have electronics, so it was pretty easy to troubleshoot. Now, here's the analogy. You know that your V8 engine inside you, or your V8 supercar, isn't working the way it should. So you lift up the hood and you think, I'll just tweak the holy carb a little bit, then it's going to run beautifully. It's not going to work. So as these functional doctors told me, you can't target the thyroid gland and believe that it's going to work. We've got to step back, have a 30,000-foot view, and then we can start to piece together what we need to do next. And that's what this video is all about. You've got to identify the root causes. There could be one, there could be several. Now, for some of you guys, we're just going to need a bit of a tweak. And all that's going to mean is we need to eliminate the trojans and also check nutrient status. And we can do that very simply and very precisely, which is key. And the next piece of the puzzle is working out which blood labs to get to work out where you're busted inside. Like, this is so key, because until you understand the underlying issues that are kind of festering away, we can't really solve any problems. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about supplements that you shouldn't take and also things that maybe that you should. So we're going to open up the hood and have a look at that. So there's basic things you can do and you can go more advanced, and that's what it's all about. And we're also going to provide a case study of a gentleman that we're working with that's got Hashimoto's and he's on the road to recovery. But not always can you recover from Hashimoto's, and I know that's not what you want to hear. So you don't want to put this off. You don't want to wait, because you don't want this 4-cylinder thyroid. You want this V8. Because what I've learned about thyroid also is it's got a butter zone. So too high, no good. Too low, no good. You've got to get in the butter zone. And that's what we're going to flesh out and pass out here today. So let's start here. So in this book, and this is going to give you the first insight, why do I still have thyroid symptoms when my lab tests are normal? Because the reason why you can go to your allopathic doctor and he'll check your blood labs, and they normally only check for THS, thyroid stimulating hormone, and this is a typical laboratory range, 0.5 to 5.5. Not really that good. What we have to do, according to functional medicine, is get between 1.8 and 3. So you can see that inverted U curve that I mentioned there. This is the butter zone, so that's where we've got to get it. Too low, too high, even if it's in that typical laboratory range, isn't ideal. It can actually mean that your thyroid hormone is tapping out. So I've also learned that there's basically 28 patterns of thyroid dysfunction. So it can get in depth. Now, some of you guys, we're just going to need a lifestyle change and a nutrient status check and maybe some blood labs. Now, for other people, it's going to be a lot more intensive than that. And I'll provide the case study just to show you what could be in front of you. So from this book, this is what they say that the thyroid can do for us. So as he articulates in that book, let's imagine that your body is a busy city and your thyroid is the central power plant that keeps everything running smoothly. So think about it like that. Now, I like to think about the V8 engine, so I'm thinking about things differently. Suffice to say, your gallbladder and liver, you've got to get it in optimal ranges for those organ systems to function correctly. And if you want optimal levels of growth hormone for tissue repair, which is super important, especially for endothelial function, which is your vascular system, we need growth hormone running. And if you want to get that lean body, thyroid hormone can do that for you. Then as we segue it further into what the thyroid does, you've got insulin and glucose metabolism. So if it's too low, you're going to have elevations in glucose and insulin, so you'll be lethargic and tired. Your cholesterol levels can go up too. Your brain chemistry, it doesn't work too well, so you can have mood disorders and you just don't feel very well. Then estrogen metabolism. So we're going to unpack that because that's a big problem for especially a lot of guys, because they're becoming estrogen dominant. They've got no clue. Then adrenal hormone metabolism. So you don't want your cortisol up too high too long. You want to, metabolize that pretty efficiently. Then on to liver detox. And this is huge. We've got to have a healthy liver because as Dr. Data said in this book there, when it comes to thyroid hormone, you've got T4. So we've got T4 and T3. Now, T4 is like crude oil, as he articulated in that book, and you can't do a lot with crude oil. We've got to turn it into fuel. And 60% of that conversion happens in the liver. So you can see that we have to have a very high functioning liver. So a little bit more, and then we're going to start to talk about what we need to do. Stomach acid production. So, you can get stomach reflux and not feel very good. Protein metabolism. So even if you're eating enough protein, you can have protein deficiency because you're just not absorbing it the way you should. Body heat fluctuations. And your testosterone production will come down. Anemia, protein binding, and I just want to do a bit of a focus on heart health here under the lens of homocysteine levels. So let's have a look at what homocysteine can do. So basically, there's four things that play into elevations in homocysteine. And before I talk about that, let's explore what high homocysteine levels do over time, decades. So you've got diabetes, kidney disease, cardiovascular disease, migraines, cancer, bone fracture. You've got problems with your eyesight, cognitive decline, hearing loss, infertility, and depression. So another thing we have to consider is that the standard labs say that 14 and below is okay. Again, functional medicine says 7 and below is ideal. So that's where we've got to get it to. And another big thing about, let's bring this to front here, about homocysteine is that if you've got elevations in homocysteine, guess what? You will have low glutathione. And as you can see here, it plays into thyroid issues. But at the same time, you got neuro and brain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Hunting's, migraines, autism, multiple sclerosis, depression, bipolar. Holy shit. Cardiovascular. Then you've got immune and cancer and other things like inflammatory skin conditions. So accelerated aging, arthritis, chronic fatigue, the list goes on and on. What we're going to explore now is what thyroid hormone can do for us when we get it, again, and critically into this butter zone, not too high, not too low. This video I'm about to play for you comes from Kevin Tokoff, and this video is actually linked below in the description there, so you can check that out later, after this if you like. And this is just going to explain how critical thyroid hormone is.
Transporters in their membranes. So more glucose transporters allows them to import more glucose in, and they can use that glucose to make ATP. So remember that, more ATP to do work. And so some of that work could be protein synthesis, but we can't make proteins without amino acids. So thyroid hormones will also stimulate amino acid uptake. So if you have more thyroid hormone, you have more amino acid uptake by these cells. And this is most pronounced in skeletal muscle, which requires a lot of protein synthesis. So the ATP from metabolism, compounded with the increased amino acid uptake, gives you increased protein synthesis. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. A couple other things about thyroid hormones. One, they also increase the overall metabolic rate. So what does that mean? Well, metabolism is just pathways. It's a bunch of enzymes that are catalyzing reactions. For example, if we're looking at the degradation of glucose into pyruvate, which is glycolysis, That's a series of 10 enzymes. And when we look at the rate of metabolism, that depends on how many of those enzymes we have. So this is a very abstract way of looking at it, but let's suppose out of glycolysis we have 1,000 enzymes. Okay, we have 1,000 molecules of the enzymes in glycolysis. Well, if we add some thyroid hormone, maybe instead of 1,000 we go up to 10,000. Okay, we have 10 times the number of enzymes. Therefore, we can break down 10 times the number of glucose molecules into pyruvate. So kind of a simplistic way of looking at it, but that's essentially what thyroid hormone does, is it increases the amount of the enzymes we have, and that allows us to metabolize faster because we have more of them. It's kind of like if you had a bunch of workers who are building a house. You're going to be able to build the house faster if you have more workers, right? Makes intuitive sense, hopefully.
So basically in all of your cells, you can think when you've got thyroid dysfunction, all of your cells are like a small town. They're not going to do a lot of work. Muscle building, fat loss, testosterone production, brain health, metabolism. So consider for a moment that you've optimized your thyroid hormones in the butter zone there. So you're going to have better muscle growth, fat loss, testosterone production. So as Kevin said there, you got to think about what kind of house you're building. For a lot of people, unfortunately, as I was, they're building that shit house, so to speak. But you want the penthouse, and that's the way I think about it. Now, what thyroid hormone will do for testosterone, as Kevin mentioned there, it's putting more transporters and more enzymes in the pathway. So instead of having a small town, we've got like a small city. So the question becomes, how does thyroid hormone increase testosterone? Well, point number one is that T3, which is the active form, it increases Leydig cell LH receptors. So Leydig cells are cells inside your testes, and more doors means more LH in to make testosterone faster. And they're also increasing the enzymes in the steroidogenic pathway. So let's just explore what that looks like. So this is a cell inside the testes there. Now, let's consider for a moment that, again, we're in the butter zone. So LH here, you've got more doors. So LH is going to get in there faster to make testosterone. Now, you've got enzymes all throughout the testes there, and enzymes. So you can see what I'm saying there. So basically what that extrapolates to is all of your cells have more power to do more work. Okay, so that's the big takeaway. Now, one thing about testosterone production and energy production, fat loss, is all of it's really facilitated in the mitochondria here. Now, unfortunately for a lot of people, they've got sick mitochondria. So cortisol, stress, inflammation, they become chronic. What happens to your mitochondria, which are like the powerhouses of a cell to make ATP for energy, fat loss, testosterone production. So they go through this process called fusion, and they turn into small damaged mitochondria. So the analogy that I like to give is the beat up 4-cylinder engine there. Now you want the V8. So that's pretty easy to solve. Mitochondria, according to Dr. Rhonda Patrick, is that high intensity interval training increases mitochondrial capacity in younger people by a massive 49%, which is pretty good. Older people, 69%. So that's HIIT cardio. So that's a great way to increase the energy powerhouses in your cell. So if you've got thyroid working for you and you've got rich mitochondria, you're a long step in the right direction. Now, one thing that I always like to talk about is how the system brushes off low T. They don't really care about it, especially when you go to your allopathic doctor. And it doesn't matter if you've got low T or whatever it is, but you could have these symptoms. So remember that the thyroid hormone is kind of key here. So when you've got low testosterone, and you certainly go out and do your due diligence. Now, this publication, there's many more like them, is from a pristine publication in Nature. So check out the headline here. Sexual and non-sexual symptoms of testosterone deficiency can negatively affect quality of life and cause considerable general health concerns. Well, I don't know how general they are, so check this out. So you got decreased energy, vitality, well-being and motivation, decreased physical and work performance, decreased mood, feeling sad and blue, impaired cognition, increased sleepiness and fatigue. So you've also got poor concentration and memory, you're packing on the fat, and your actual testes, they shrink. Then you've got reduced beard growth, body hair, man boobs, and sexual dysfunction, along with less muscle bulk and bone density. So I don't know how general those health concerns are. So what you might know is testosterone isn't supposed to decline as the system says that it is. They're trying to normalize low T in men. As you can see on screen there, this is Professor Huberman, neuroendocrinologist from Stanford, and he says on his podcast, he said this a few times, there are men in their 90s that are not rare, right? Not, I'll underscore that, not rare, that are making as much testosterone and DHT, dihydrotestosterone, as they were in their 20s. So if we optimize the body, the thyroid, all of it, we'll be able to build a life that we're proud of and provide for our family. And that's what my advisor, Dr. J, said, who did a 5-year PhD on hormones.
They've got as much testosterone and dihydrotestosterone as they did in their 20s.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yep.
It's surprising how little it goes down with age.
Yep.
If you optimize your health.
And so it's possible.
So we know that it's possible. And just one more point before I move on to the Trojan horses on thyroid. Dr. J pointed me out to this research paper here. And you know what Dr. J did when he did his 5-year PhD? He went all the way back to the 1940s when testosterone was first being measured. And he found that a man my age, and I'm 52, had well over double what the average is today. And there was a massive and rapid fallout ever since the 1980s, 1.6% per year, which is a pretty massive 16% per decade. So 87 to 89, a man my age, were about, 550. And 2002 to 2004, just over the 400, and it's about 350 today. So Dr. J said to me, if your testosterone is 500 and below, big problem, better fix it immediately. And when you hear someone that's done a 5-year PhD in hormones articulate that fact, you pay attention. So I did. Now, as you can see here, in the 1990s, when it was still over that 500, the percentage of obese adults in the United States, we were still relatively lean, motivated, and driven. You fast forward to 2018, we're a mess, and they're trying to normalize this in men. So don't believe everything that the corporate media says or mainstream medicine, allopathic medicine. It's not supposed to drop like that. So known thyroid Trojan horses. So we're going to start getting deep into the weeds. And then remember at the end here, I'm going to give you the tips that you'll need to move forward with this. So this is in this book, Why Do I Still Have Thyroid Symptoms Even When My Labs Are Normal? So if you got Hashimoto's, and a lot of people don't even realize they've got that, and I'll show you how to check for that shortly. It's a lot of times we're told to supplement iodine, or according to the experts, it's like throwing gasoline onto a fire. It's going to make it worse. So what I'm going to do now is just show you, this is Hashimoto's here. So you've got elevations in your thyroid antibodies. Okay, so that's the big indicator. You got to get them below 60. Now, this gentleman that we're working with a functional medical professional that specializes in thyroid health. So I'm going to play a couple of excerpts from that consultation just to show you what we need to do and how long it can potentially take if you've got Hashimoto's. So video 1, the elevations in the thyroid antibodies there. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're actually a little lower than they were the last time. And have you been pretty strict on the gluten-free part of the diet, or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the number one cause of that in America, at least, is gluten intolerance. So they've actually come down a little bit since the last lab work that you had. Those thyroid antibodies can be coming down, especially if they're gluten generated, for up to a year and a half.
Okay, there. So gluten can be a big piece of the problem there. And as Dr. Meyer said, the functional doctor, that it can take up to 18 months, a year and a half, for those thyroid antibodies to come down. But this gentleman here is about 8 months in, and he's well on the road to recovery, so you can actually heal from this. Now, the next piece of the puzzle is methylation. So when your homocysteine is elevated and it's a bit too high, that's still a big problem. And I'm going to show you why that's a big problem shortly, especially for thyroid hormone.
Total testosterone now is at a high level. Free testosterone is kind of in the middle. It looks good where it's at. Kind of got to get your methylation up too, because that homocysteine level is at 18, and that means we don't have enough active B12 and folate on board. We get that. It's a marker for inflammation in the blood vessels, but it's also a marker that you're not methylating efficiently. You're not activating folate and B12 efficiently. Your C-reactive protein looked good. It's right where it should be. It's below 1. So I'm not as worried about the inflammatory part about it as the methylation part. That methylation is actually the end metabolism of estrogen. You methylate estradiol and estrone to methoxyestradiol and methoxyestrone. So that'll help clear the estrogen out too. But it's also important for energy production, phase 2 liver detoxification, DNA repair, neurotransmitter production. So getting those B vitamins, especially B12 and folate, at the right level is going to affect all those systems.
Okay, so let me unpack that. This gentleman now has only got 2 problems. His inflammation is down low, his testosterone's up nice and high. We've just still got 2 problems. Now, this problem number 1 here, it's working. We're getting it back down. And again, it can take up to 1.5 years to fix that issue. Now, homocysteine here, number 2, it takes anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks to bring this down. And that's what we've learned from people like Dr. Myers. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. So even though this gentleman has got all of his nutrient status on points through the RDI, there's 2 B vitamins that he needs to increase quite substantially. So folate, the RDI is 400, and Dr. Myers has recommended 5,000 micrograms. And also B12, we've got to increase that to 2,000 micrograms. And that's going to fix the elevations in homocysteine. Now, this gentleman, like myself, that's a genetic issue, okay? Because as you can see here, he's got this gene SNP, which means he doesn't metabolize homocysteine efficiently. And the only way to solve that issue is to supplement more folate and B12. Now, how many times do you go to your allopathic doctor and they look at your blood labs and know exactly what to do at this detail? So that, my friends, is the difference between allopathic medicine and functional medicine. They fix you through nutrition and supplementation. And there's a lot of genetic issues that can play out, and I'll speak a little bit more about that as we progress. Now, one thing with gluten intolerance is simply this. Like, you can go to your allopathic doctor and they'll check you for celiac. Now, here's the problem that I've learned through functional medicine. And I learned about this one in this book here, Why My Brain Isn't Working. So when they test you for celiac, they only test for 2 things: gluten alpha and also transglutinase 2. That's it. But you can have a sensitivity to gluten over here: lectins, glutamorphins, transglutinase 3, skin, 6, the brain, deaminated gliadin, and gliadin beta, gamma, and omega. So you've got to get a comprehensive screening to see if you're sensitive to it. Or the simple solution is to get your genetics tested. So probably, I'll just show you this page here. Now, we've done genetic testing with over 150 people now, and the data is in. Gluten intolerance equates to about 80% of the people that we help. So it's a bit of a mess out there. You might have been tested for celiac and it's showed negative, but you can still have a sensitivity to it, which is going to drive thyroid issues and a lot of other issues too. And another big issue, especially with wheat, is that it's got lectins in it. Now, Dr. J is also a genetic expert. And if you've got this gene here, this gentleman's actually got two for lectin sensitivity, this is what can happen also.
The lectin is the big one. That's a 4-fold higher risk of heart disease, even as a plus minus, the SELE.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So lectins are going to trigger a lot of damage to the arteries and damage to the gut. I would recommend avoiding grains.
Yeah.
You know, grains are the major source of lectins.
Yeah.
And his gut's very sensitive to grains also with the gluten. And he's got a thyroid gene that comes up later with gluten as well. So I would say just take off the grains, you know.
Did you hear that? He's got a thyroid gene sensitive to gluten too. So it's the gut, it's a whole bunch of different organ systems. And what we're going to do now is segue into phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox and methylation, right? This all comes back to glutathione and methylation and homocysteine. So when you're not methylating properly, your homocysteine will be elevated. And this is what methylation is responsible for. It's actually responsible for 300 processes, and here's just 15. We're talking about DNA methylation, gene regulation, detoxification, neurotransmitter synthesis and metabolism, phosphatidylcholine synthesis, which is extremely important, protein synthesis, fat metabolism, so if you want to be lean, hormone regulation, energy production, DNA repair, viral suppression, mood and brain function, histamine metabolism. Now, a lot of people suffer with elevations in histamine too. And of course, homocysteine metabolism. So if you're not methylating properly, you can have allergies. You can have allergies and inflammatory response on the H1 receptor, the H2, stomach and immune response, the H3, wakefulness and brain function, the H4, an inflammatory response. So if you're not methylating, it can drive a lot of fatigue. As you can see this, that's what I'm talking about, because it also plays into thyroid optimization. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, you can't just open up the hood in your V8 and work on the holy carb. We've got to work on the whole body to get it working at a very high level, efficiently. So we're just going to do a bit of a geek look into the folate pathway, the methylation pathway, and transsulfuration pathway, because they all play into glutathione and detoxification. So what's important to understand here is this folate pathway attaches through the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase gene onto methylation. So this is the methylation pathway, so MTR here. And then this pathway joins onto the CBS, which is the homocysteine transsulfuration, which looks like this. So it's going to join here on the homocysteine. Now, you don't need to know any of this. That's the beautiful news. The reason I'm mentioning this is have a look at the vitamins and minerals that your body needs to keep these pathways turning. Have a look. We've got NAD, which is B3, magnesium, 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 zinc, molybdenum, copper, zinc, manganese, copper, iron. Then we've got iron again, selenium. So the point I'm making here, very simply, is that we've got to be precisely tracking our macronutrients. Now, before I go on, I just want to make sure that you're aware of this other caveat. The functional doctor noticed that the homocysteine was up, even though he had optimal nutrient status. Now, because he's got gene mutations like myself, he's got to go from the RDI, which is 400, to 5,000. So as you can see there, we're all uniquely different. And when you go to functional doctors, they can identify this and they know exactly what to do. So towards the end of this, I'm going to show you how to get in contact with a functional doctor, because can you see how critically important it is to have all of these blood metrics in the ideal position, because then you know all of these pathways, which are so critically important, they're open, they're working. You've got energy production, you've got methylation, you're repairing your DNA, you're making hormones, you're detoxing the liver. All of those things are absolutely key. So, methylation is huge for glutathione. So as I pointed out at the beginning of this, if you've got low glutathione, because your homocystine's up. And I'll just stop and pause for a second. How many times do you go to your allopathic doctor and he checks for homocysteine, which I believe is one of the most important things you can check for? Very rarely. So that's a very important thing to check for. And another important point I want to make is that if they do check it, they'll say 14 and below is okay. Again, that's a very wide blood lab. Functional medicine says we need to get it 7 and below. 7 and below. So have a look at what low glutathione means. Neuro and brain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, migraines, multiple sclerosis, autism, ADHD, ADD, bipolar, depression, cardiovascular, hypertension, stroke, erectile dysfunction, atherosclerosis, immune and cancer, asthma, viral infections, lupus, AIDS, cancer, acne, Lyme disease, allergies, gingivitis, rheumatoid arthritis. And over here to the other ones, you've got inflammatory skin conditions, accelerated aging, arthritis again. You can see it's just a complete mess. So what you've got to do is track your nutrition. And if that doesn't quite optimize you, you now understand that you could have a genetic mutation and you need much more than the RDI. So you don't want to just go throwing everything at this haphazardly. We leave nothing to chance. We make sure that we work with functional doctors that know exactly what they're doing, because your longevity, your health is absolutely everything. It's everything, my friends. So let's have a look at some more Trojan horses when it comes to thyroid. So right here, the thyroid gland, smoking, alcohol's not much good. And if you've got a high body mass index, that's not good. You need to be exercising too, because the more you exercise, the more you need your thyroid hormone to do work. Now, the diet, you've got cruciferous vegetables here, but also soy. So what I'm going to do is actually go to this research paper here. And what we will do is have a quick look at this research paper. So we'll scroll down here. Scrolling. And as you can see here, soy actually interferes with an enzyme that produces your thyroid hormones. It kind of slows it down. And they've shown in human studies that soy-fed infants develop goiter. So that's not a good thing, is it? So as you can see there's a lot of things that can impede thyroid function. So you've got chemicals and pollutants and heavy metals, of course, and we're going to talk about more about this very shortly. But I just wanted you to be aware of the things that you think are healthy for you, but maybe not if you've got thyroid issues. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So we're going to have a look at what the thyroid actually needs to function. So it's a very energy, it needs a lot of nutrients to keep it going 24/7. So you need nutrients like iron, iodine, tyrosine, zinc, selenium, vitamin E, the B vitamins, C and D. Then this is what's going to take it out over here. So you've got stress, trauma, a low-calorie diet. It makes perfect sense, a low-calorie diet. If you're in constant energy deprivation, your body thinks, shit, we better hold on to energy so the thyroid hormone comes down and your testosterone comes down and you struggle with weight loss. So you want to know more about that? Drop a comment below and I can talk more about that on another video. Then we've also got inflammation, toxins, infections, liver and kidney dysfunction. Well, of course, you can see how the liver is so key for optimal thyroid hormone. Then we've got medications, over here, stress again. Then we've got infections, trauma, radiation, and medications, fluoride. You've got toxins, heavy metals and pesticides, and autoimmune disease. So if you've got food sensitivities like gluten, nightshades, lectins, things like that, it can interfere with thyroid performance. Then you need selenium, zinc, vitamin A, exercise, and more zinc there. Now, I just want to focus in on mental stress, legends, because if you've got mental stress, it can crash your thyroid hormone. Going to play a video from Dr. J. Listen.
Thyroid, the TG gene is concerning. Only concerning if you have inflammation here, but a lot of people do have, a lot of people do have inflammation.
Yep.
And that's a 10-fold higher risk of autoimmune thyroid issues.
tenfold, right? So what
Yeah.
we
Well, so if he's sleeping, like inflammation usually is like lack of sleep, too much stress, like real obvious stuff, high blood sugar, heavy metals, testosterone off or whatever. So the basics are key, but it sounds like he's dialing in all that. The other thing about this gene is even if you're temporarily have inflammation, like say you've got just one day of stress, it'll shut your thyroid off for a couple of days, maybe,
Really? Okay. So stress and inflammation can shut this one down for a couple of days.
Yeah. So you just want to make sure you definitely don't want chronic inflammation, because that's where you get Hashimoto's, where you get completely destruction of your thyroid.
Yeah.
If you're just chronically not sleeping or whatever the thing is. But as long as you keep that inflammation down, you'll get plenty of energy. Your thyroid hormones should be fine.
Excellent. All right.
Right. Mental stress, emotional stress, as the science now is very clear, triggers inflammation. So it can take you out. And, they've got it here again, stress is going to take it out. So you got to make sure you've got a strong mindset. And that's, I guess, another video for another day, because, that is absolutely key. So if you've got all the vitamins and mineral status, but you've got a weak mindset, you're going to still be tapping out your thyroid. So you have to work on being strong, mentally strong. There's a lot of things you can do. Like for me, I had panic attacks, performance anxiety, social anxiety. I was deeply worried about what other people thought of me. Hell, so much so that I got hair transplants. I started to go bald when I was 16 years old. So I know what it's like to be a weak man. You don't have to live like that. You can get over these things and fix that once and for all. So if you want more information about how I did that finally, drop a comment below and I'll show you. I'll make a brand new video exactly how I performed that. Now, one thing you want to be very mindful of is big food. Their food comes packed with inflammation. It's got, as you can see here, amplifies systemic inflammation, the role of advanced glycation and lip oxidization end products in food. So it's packed full of inflammation, and it causes 50 times more free radicals. It's just cheap, nutrient poor food. It's not thyroid food at all. So that's something to think about. Now, the way I think about food, once you know your genetics, you know where you thrive, it's just it's simply a matter of working how many carbs, proteins, and fats you need, then using what we call the hunter method. If it comes off an animal, out of the ground or off a tree, it's going to be pretty safe. So if it comes in a box or a jar, it's full of inflammation. Okay, that's the bottom line. So chemicals, number one, they disrupt your thyroid hormone. That's bad in and of itself. It's going to tank your testosterone. But it's a double whammy because they're estrogenic. They mimic estrogen in your body. You go into fat storing mode. You feel tired and lethargic. And it's anti-androgenic, so it tanks your testosterone. Now, one thing that we've seen, again, we've done over 150 people with their blood labs, and we see this quite frequently, iron overload. So when you've got iron overload, and I'll show you how to fix this problem. It's super easy. It can affect all these organ systems, the pituitary, the thyroid, the heart, the liver, the pancreas, the gonads, and arthritis. So it can drive a lot of big issues. And as you can see on this research paper here, sexual dysfunction, hypogonadism. So quite literally, you can have primary or secondary or both. It's going to be crushing your T. And you've got low testosterone and you've got decreased libido and sexual function with iron overload. So the question becomes, how do you fix it? Donate blood. Pretty simple. And donating blood has a lot of health benefits, but one of the big health benefits is it keeps your iron at healthy levels. But another thing is you could be saving another life. Now, this is where it gets back to standard labs. So you can get a comprehensive comprehensive iron lab. It checks a whole bunch of things, but the main one that Dr. J tells me to check for is ferritin here. Now, here's the problem. On a lab, they'll say anywhere between 30 and 400 is okay. Not even close. Dr. J says between 50 and 100. Now, there's another big problem with iron overload, especially if you've got this gene here. Listen carefully to this, my friends.
Heart disease. Yeah. So this one gene, there's really the two genes here, but the SOD2 gene is not a risk unless her ferritin is high. But if her ferritin is high, this gene gives her a 10-fold higher risk of heart disease, which is super high risk.
10-fold, yeah.
We want that to be 0-fold. So you got to make sure the ferritin is between 50 and 100, not just 50 to 500 or some kind of crazy nonsense.
Yeah.
Has to be optimal, not just normal in this one.
Yep. Okay. Now, if you do have that problem, you're going to have a lot of inflammation. And what happens when you've got inflammation? It shuts down your thyroid hormone, and it can eventually drive, as Dr. J said, Hashimoto's, thyroid tissue damage. So this iron overload is a pretty big problem. It's very easy to solve. You just donate blood. And just to have a look at one of the organ system that ferritin screws up is the pituitary gland here. All right, so all of these hormones, growth, follicle stimulating, oxytocin, testosterone, endorphins, melanocyte stimulating hormone, thyroid hormones, thyroxine, you can see it's taken out quite a lot. It's basically going to really turn down the power inside your V8 engine. So that's what iron overload can do. Now, one thing that I want to talk about very quickly is insulin resistance. So what I've learned about insulin resistance, well, before I actually go to that slide, I'll go here first, because I want to play this video from Dr. Mark Heyman, who is a functional medical professional. Listen to this.
Sure. We know clearly that pancreatic cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, many of the common cancers, pancreatic cancer, are caused by something called insulin resistance, which is prediabetes or poor metabolic health. 93.2% of Americans are in poor metabolic health, meaning they have some form of prediabetes or insulin resistance. They have high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, they're overweight, or they've had a heart attack or stroke. And that poor metabolic health is driving all these conditions, whether it's cancer, heart disease, diabetes, dementia, depression, infertility, so many different things, even acne. Our food system is the biggest killer on the planet. There's a doctor at Harvard, Christopher.
All right, so we can see that it's a big problem. And as he said, the 92.3 have some form of metabolic dysfunction or insulin resistance. So from the scientific literature, what you've got here is you've got low T anyway when you've got insulin resistance. Then to make matters worse, it fires up this process of aromatization of testosterone. That simply means you're taking your testosterone and converting into estrogens. That's pretty bad in and of itself. But you've also got more oxidative stress and inflammation. So there's the thyroid connection. So your thyroid's going to tap out when you've got insulin resistance. However, and critically, it gets worse. You've got an enlarged prostate, frequent urinations. You've got gynecomastia, man boobs. You've got obesity, atherosclerosis through hypertension over here. Yeah, hypertension, and it's going to eventually get to type 2 diabetes. You've got insulin resistance, erectile dysfunction. It drives a lot of cancer, as we saw. This is one research paper. Dr. Mark Heyman has spoken to that. Here's another research paper from Nature. So insulin trends and insulin resistance, insights into mechanisms and therapeutic strategies. So if you want me to do a video on how to fix this insulin resistance, because I had to, let me know and I'll do a video on that. So with the heart, you've got atherosclerosis and hypertension and cardiomyopathy. So your fat cells are inflamed and they're leaching inflammation that's going to tank your thyroid hormone and your testosterone and your muscle growth. Then your muscles, they've got lipotoxicity, glucose intolerance, and type 2 diabetes. You've got a fatty liver, your central nervous system, your moneymaker, my friends. You've got disruptions in brain development. You've got Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline. And of course, cancer, kidney dysfunction, and if you're a chick, polycystic ovary syndrome. So how do we start solving this problem? Well, I'm going to give you one tool right now. So you've probably heard Professor Huberman speak about getting the sun. If you've been here on the YouTubes, he shouts it, he screams it, because it is so key. It optimizes cortisol, it turns on your sex hormones. But one thing that it does turn on, When you get morning light to the eye, you don't look directly at the sun, of course. It goes through the retina all the way through here and triggers thyroid stimulating hormone. So the earlier you get out in the sun, the more thyroid hormone is going to be triggered to be produced. How cool is that? And all you got to do is get outside in the sun. Now, that's pretty key. Now, another thing is sleep, my friends. And guess what? Insulin resistance can give you poor sleep because your sympathetic nervous system is chronically being activated, so you can't get into sleep. So got to fix that insulin resistance. Now, Matthew Walker here, listen to this.
Not getting sufficient sleep, 70% of all the weight that you lose will come from lean muscle mass, and not fat.
Right. The body, when it's fatigued in that way, wants to hold on to those fat cells.
Exactly.
Right?
Your body becomes stingy in giving up its fat.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, when you are underslept, but you're trying to watch your diet, watch what you eat, you will lose what you wanted to keep, which is muscle, and you will gain what you wanted to lose,
which is fat, my friends. Now, coming from Dr. Matthew Walker, who's a neuroscientist that just researches sleep, after 10 days of just 7 hours sleep, just 7 hours, 10 days, the brain is as dysfunctional as it would be going without sleep for 24 hours. So I'm getting at least 8 hours every day. Probably on average about 8 hours and 15 is what I'm getting, because it is that key. If you want to kick ass, don't listen to the gurus that say you only need 6 hours, you only need 7 hours. Like, you can survive on that. Now, here's the important thing that I learned from Matthew Walker. He said you get used to that low energy state and you believe you're fine. So when you're younger, you're not getting the sleep, you're not optimal. Sleep is the foundation to it all. Have to get good sleep. Sleep, my friends. So this is how you sleep. And I won't drive into that here today because this video is going quite long enough, my friends. Now, the next piece of the puzzle is what labs to get checked and what is the optimal ranges. So I've got a link to go and grab that PDF to see what that is. And this is one of our clients who had a blood disorder. Now, working with a functional doctor, look, I'm no fucking expert. I connect you to the experts. This is what was possible.
Like everything is looking great. Like my platelets, look where I was. Like my brain was blowing up over here. Wow. I think I went up to 600 at a point because I can't see this. Red blood cell count going up. Hemoglobin. I hadn't seen that in years, brother.
Yeah, excellent.
So for me, these are the main
metrics.
My main metrics because I had a blood disorder, right? So
that's looking good.
This is like you're supposed to be cuckoo, and yeah, I was very cuckoo at that time.
So you've got to get your blood labs in the optimal range because it's the foundation. Sleep's the foundation, of course, but to see where your physiology is moving towards, whether it's moving towards health and longevity or it's pathologies and disease, you've got to get your blood labs done. And I know that's tough. I had to do it. You don't want to do it. You don't even want to know sometimes. But when you start moving in the right direction, as you saw with the case study at the beginning of this, it feels good. You're getting it in the right direction. So you have to get your head out of the sand and have the courage to get this done. Because if you want to live a long, strong life, this is key. So the next piece of the puzzle, well, I'll talk about this next, how to get the nutrient status right, is the basics. And I'm going to play a video here for you in a moment about one key nutrient that's lacking in our diet, especially as we age. So we know that sleep is key, vitamin status and blood labs, morning and afternoon sun, exercise is key. Like if you want to have a lot of energy, it's a paradox, isn't it? If you exercise correctly and don't overtrain, you're going to have more energy and more thyroid support. Then supplementation, as I mentioned at the beginning of it, iodine can actually backfire on some people. It's not for everyone. And the only way you'll know is to get your blood labs checked to see if you've got those thyroid antibodies. Now, you can also do breath work, which significantly lowers stress. Okay, Professor Huber's got a lot of information on that. It's been key for me. And it just takes 5 goddamn minutes a day. And that's all it takes. Then track your nutrients. Now, there's other things you can do. You can get your genetics tested, and I've got more information about that below. Foods that heal and foods that harm. We've all got different food sensitivities. And once you take what harms you off the table and understand the foods that help you thrive, it makes everything a lot easier. Now, as I mentioned there, mindset is absolutely huge, because if you are mentally and emotionally stressed, it's going to tax your thyroid hormone. It doesn't matter what you do. Then you can get trophic support for the brain, which I won't dive into today. But that basically means you need all your blood work in the right range. You need optimal hormone production. And I'm going to show you how to connect with a functional doctor very shortly. What I'm going to do now is play this video about that supplement that's key to activate thyroid stimulating hormone.
To work, but it's also needed for thyroid stimulating hormone to work. So you can have great thyroid stimulating hormone levels, but if the signal isn't working, doesn't matter. And if you don't have good inositol levels, TSH doesn't work well. So if you have thyroid issues, could be due to the fact that you're inositol deficient and the actual signal itself isn't, working.
All right. So inositol there, B vitamin A. I've got a link below that you can have a look at it and maybe purchase it. So Dr. James recommends you get about 2 grams twice a day. That seems to be enough. And he's got another video that goes for about 10 minutes, which I won't play. And he talks about how it's important for a lot of different things. And I've actually got it listed below. So if you want to have a look below at what Dr. James says inositol is great for, please check that out. It's in the caption below. All right. So the easiest way to check your nutrient status is through an app called Chronometer. So it's just simply a matter of tracking the foods that you eat, and it's going to give you your nutrient score there. So as you can see, your vitamins, your minerals, your electrolytes, immune, antioxidants, bone, metabolism support, and it shows you exactly where you could be potentially lacking. So that's a pretty useful tool. Now, the next piece of the puzzle is working out what functional doctor you want to work with. So you can see this map here. I'll just quickly click on this and bring it up. So very simply, this website is run by a prominent cardiologist in America. And if you scroll down, you can zoom in. And basically, you can click on, say, somewhere in Florida. And if you see over here, website, phone number, and they also do remote consults. So you don't even have to go there. That's how easy it is to work with these professionals. So I've got a link to that website so you can connect with these doctors and start working with them. And as you can now see, you've got your allopathic doctors. Now, to be sure, look, they mean really well, but they're trained by the system to prescribe drugs. Functional medicine, that's the last thing that they'll do is prescribe drugs. They'll try and fix you with food and advanced supplementation, as you saw on this call. And as a last resort, they will use drugs, but only as a last resort. Does that connect the dots? So let's just wrap up everything that we've covered here. So they're the basics, and that's the advanced stuff. If you want any more information about that, I've got information below to go and, explore what you want to do, basically. And if you got any questions, drop them in the comments below. And if you like these videos, you find that they're helpful, help me out here and give it a like and give it a share and join in the conversation below. Make sure that you get your blood labs done, the right ones. Make sure they're in the right ranges. Get your sleep, get your sunshine, and get away from insulin resistance, and you're a long step in the right direction.